It's the end of 2024. Wow, this has been a wild year for me. At this time last year, I had a newborn baby and I had no idea what was coming for me, in the sense that I was still kind of riding the high of having a new baby. And right around that 8-week mark, I really hit a wall. I hit a wall emotionally, I hit a wall physically. I really struggled postpartum. And I had a really difficult time with that because I'm a therapist and it shouldn't be that hard and this is such a blessing, and I felt a lot of guilt and shame over feeling that way. And that's something that I kept in for a long time until I was like, I literally cannot do this anymore. Crying myself to sleep every single night, feeling like I'm lost and alone and having thoughts like, what did I just do? Really missing my own life, like all of those kinds of things. I ended up reaching out to a therapist. I worked with her for 6 months or something, and she was absolutely incredible, really, really helpful. And then after that, I joined a group, and the group was everything that I needed to keep healing. And between having a baby that is very strong-willed, who didn't sleep through the night, and being an entrepreneur and trying to run my own business, but also running a service-based business, moving to Alabama, like there were just a lot of moving parts this year. And as I was thinking about the highs and lows of the year and how my time last year was really about, like I was just about to go into like a massive low, and now being out on the other side, I just keep thinking about how I literally cannot imagine if I had added on the obsession with food and the binge eating and being back in that cycle on top of all of it. Like, what's so interesting to me is that the biggest misconception about binge eating is that it's a lack of willpower. And that always makes me laugh, because if you know anyone who struggles with binge eating, they are you, if you're listening to this, right? They are so disciplined, so driven, like have an extreme amount of willpower. Do you know how much willpower it takes to binge and then get quote unquote back on track? Binge, get back on track, binge, get back on track a million times? Like an insane amount of willpower. Like, and that just shows you right there that binge eating has nothing to do with willpower. But nonetheless, as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you guys about this week and what I wanted to kick this year off, is really, really looking at this being the year that you stop binge eating, that you heal your relationship with food, and I'm gonna tell you how you're gonna do it. Now, with that being said, I'm going to tell you right now that there is no magic formula. And what I'm about to tell you is probably not going to excite you, because I know that when you are in the cycle of binge eating, you're like, just tell me the thing that I need to do, right? Like there's this idea, or at least I had this idea, that if I just read one book, or if I just tried one thing, then all of a sudden like everything would just like click into place and I wouldn't feel this way anymore. And there's no like shiny way out of this. And I think one of the hardest things to get on board with when it comes to healing your relationship with food and recovering from binge eating is that the only way to the other side of the maze is through it. It's through it. It's through the messiness. It's through the hitting the wrong way and having to go back. Like, it's just messy and it's not pretty and it's not shiny, and that's why not everybody does it. But then I think like nothing worth having, like that quote of like nothing worth having comes easy. I think there's a lot of nuances to that, but I think with this, it's one of those things where it's so worth having, right? Like healing your relationship with food, recovering from binge eating is so worth having. It's not easy. I'm gonna read to you this quote from Mark Manson because he puts this in perspective really well. He says, "The older I get, the more I realize that success at most things isn't about finding the one trick or secret that nobody knows about. It's consistently doing the boring, mundane things everyone knows about but is too unfocused or undisciplined to do. Get good at boring." And I say, with this quote, it's not discipline in the sense of like, don't eat the chips or stop buying your binge trigger foods, but rather the discipline to show up for yourself and do the things that you absolutely don't want to do because that's what you need to do to heal. And the discipline to keep showing up when things get hard, and the discipline to keep moving forward when it feels like everyone around you is dieting, and the discipline to keep trying when things feel uncomfortable, and the discipline to open up and talk about things, and the discipline to choose something different. So the very first thing that you need to know when it comes to stopping binge eating, you have to understand what binge eating is. Now, you can go on Google and you can type in binge eating disorder, like what is binge eating disorder. You're gonna get a DSM criteria of what binge eating is and the clinical formulation for that. And that can be helpful in the sense that it can make you feel like you're not doing anything absolutely insane, like there's a diagnosis for it. And at the same time, I don't feel like that's very, not that it's not helpful, but it doesn't give you a ton of information. It's also very black and white. And what I've learned from my own experience struggling with binge eating and also specializing in binge eating for 5 years, working as a therapist that specializes in binge eating for 5 years now, there are so many nuances to it. And binge eating is like the furthest thing from black and white. Like there's no cookie cutter, there's no clear cut, like this is what a binge is, this isn't what a binge is. This is how you stop binge eating, this is not how you stop binge eating. This is why you're binge eating, this is not why you're binge eating. Like there are things that are pretty central, like across the board, but it's not like it's only this, you know what I mean? And so how I see binge eating and the definition that has really resonated with me is that binge eating is a reaction to unmet needs. The reason why I say reaction and why I like the word reaction is because anybody who has struggled with binge eating, again, you struggling with binge eating, you know that when you have the urge to binge and when you're actually going through a binge, it feels very reactive. It feels out of your control. It almost feels out of body. And when we look at it as a reaction, just even right there in that definition, we can take this idea out that stopping the binges is as simple as just having a little bit more discipline. Because I'll tell you right now, if that was true, knowing how disciplined you are, you wouldn't still be struggling with binge eating. So I know when I say reaction to unmet needs, there's a lot of question marks that go up. Like, what the heck does that mean? So let me give you a few examples of what I mean by that and just notice if any of these hit with you. So the most common unmet need that is pretty central across the board through many people that struggle with binge eating, not always, but many, is not eating enough and not nourishing themselves and this extreme restriction. So why does binge eating meet that need? I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Binge eating is a quick way to make up for the lack of calories, the lack of satisfaction, the lack of nutrients, etc. If your unmet need is comfort, you're not getting comfort in your life. Binge eating and getting really full from all the food can feel like a hug. Let's say you're not allowing yourself to rest. Binge eating literally forces you to rest because when you're so full, you can't move, you have to lay down. If you're not getting validation, binge eating can become a form of a reward. It almost feels like I deserve this, like a way to give yourself validation. If you're not expressing emotion, whether it is because you don't know how to or you feel afraid to, binge eating is a way to distract yourself from that or numb so you don't have to feel it. If you have a lack of pleasure in your life, binge eating, like not even just the food itself, but the high of deciding that you're gonna binge, the high of planning the foods that you're gonna have, the high of actually going through the binge is very pleasurable. If you feel like you don't have any autonomy in your life, in a way, binge eating can feel like you're taking back your power. Like, this is something that I am doing. If you feel like you don't have a sense of purpose in your life, binge eating gives you something to focus on, whether it's giving you a focus on the food, or because you are binge eating, in a way it feels like you have control over your weight, and that gives you a sense of purpose in a way. And then another example is if you don't have any sensory stimulation in your life, binge eating wakes up all your senses when you're eating salty, sweet, crunchy, chewy, going back and forth and back and forth. So when I say binge eating is a reaction to unmet needs, that's what I mean. There are unmet needs. We all have needs as human beings. I should probably go back to that. We all have needs as human beings. And these are needs that we have from a biological perspective that helps us function optimally, that we need to survive. Now, there are things on here, right, that I said, like, you don't need validation to survive. But if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, love and belonging is on there. And in a way, validation is a form of love and belonging. Like, it's connected to love and belonging. So again, it's all nuanced, and you could get into the nitty gritty of like, what, well, so-and-so, you know, doesn't get validation and they don't binge, and that's when we get into the layers. So let's just start with the fact of the matter. When you're thinking about you and your binges and what is fueling your binges, rather than looking at this as the food being the problem, what if we start to look at what is the unmet need that is happening in your life that is driving the binges in the first place? Because this is why binge urge strategies haven't worked for you, and they drive me freaking nuts. You know, when someone says, when you have the urge to binge, go for a walk. When you have the urge to binge, just shake it out. When you have the urge to binge, journal or color. And oh my God, those used to piss me off so much, because I'd be like, are you joking? Or like, you've clearly never had the urge to binge. Because if you have had the urge to binge, you know that when you are in that state of mind, no freaking way you're gonna color. And even if you muster up the energy to go for a walk, I mean, how many times have you come back and just binged? I know that's something that I did, because it's not about the binge just coming out of nowhere. It is a lower driver that is fueling the binges, which means that if you actually want to get rid of the binge urge, we have to figure out like what is fueling that in the first place. The best analogy that I can give, and if you've ever done a workshop with me, you know, you've probably heard this before, but the best analogy that I can give is if you break your leg, the pain that you experience because of your broken leg is a symptom of the deeper problem, having a broken leg. To help with that pain, you can take pain medicine, but if you want the pain to stop forever, you have to heal your broken leg. If you just take pain medicine and don't put on a cast and just keep walking on your broken leg, the pain is not gonna go away. That's how I want you to think about binges. Binge eating is similar to the pain that comes from breaking your leg. And I want you to think of pain medicine similar to these binge urge strategies that people give when you have the urge to binge. Sure, it might help here and there, but the urges are still gonna come. If you want the urges to go away forever, we have to heal what is fueling them in the first place. That means figuring out what your unmet needs are, and then asking and getting curious about why are they unmet in the first place. Okay, so binge eating. If you want the clinical definition, you can Google it. Summary of that is that it's eating a lot of food in a short period of time, more food than someone would eat in a regular sitting. Now, I don't love that, because what I have found, and there's actually more research on this, and this is probably going to come out in the new DSM whenever they decide to make that, is there are actually two different forms of binge eating that have nothing to do with the amount of food that you're eating. So there are objective binges, which is the classic eating a lot of food in a short period of time, very rapid, very fast. And then there is not eating a ton of food but still having the same sensations that someone who is experiencing a classic objective binge might have. So there's still the perceived loss of control, there's still the secretiveness, there's still the high and the low. I don't like to classify binges based on the amount of food that you've eaten. I classify binges based on the driver behind them, the experience that you're having during the binge, and what you feel afterwards. That is a pretty telltale sign of whether or not someone is binging versus just eating a lot of food versus emotional eating. There are a lot of layers there, and I know it's confusing, so I will just say this. If you struggle with binge eating, if you've experienced a true binge, you know. If you have to ask yourself, I don't know whether or not I'm binge eating, I'm gonna say that you're probably not. I'm just gonna take a guess, and I'm gonna say that you're probably not, because anybody who has experienced binge eating, that is a very different experience than what someone just did on Thanksgiving, right? Like if someone eats a lot of food on Thanksgiving and they're like, I just binged, I mean, it's a very different experience. I'm not saying that experience is invalid. I'm just saying when you're looking at whether or not someone actually engaged in a binge behavior, because binge is thrown around so easily now, binge watched Netflix, binged, whatever. It's not the amount of food. It is the driver, the experience during the binge, and the experience after the binge. Okay, so that's on binge eating. The second thing that you're gonna do is you are going to commit to taking binge eating recovery seriously. Now, this might be a little bit of a hard truth, and you might have just heard that and been like, wait, what? I have been. You have been taking dieting seriously. You've been taking restriction seriously. You've been taking your meal plan seriously. You've been taking your exercise plan seriously. Binge eating recovery, like true binge eating recovery, have you been taking that seriously? Because I'll just talk from personal experience. I spent a hell of a lot of time saying that I was taking this seriously, and I was taking weight loss seriously. I was taking like trying to figure out how do I stop binge eating so that I can lose weight. Like I was taking that seriously, but like healing my relationship with food and recovering from binge eating and doing deeper healing work, I did not take that seriously until my sophomore year of college. I struggled with binge eating for 7 years before I literally had a hard look in the mirror and I was like, it is time to get serious about this. And when I got serious about this, I dedicated my entire summer from sophomore year to junior year to binge eating recovery. Like I kid you not, like got a little obsessive with it. Like a little extreme, like every book that there was, I read, every support group that I could go to, I went to, I did therapy, I did outpatient treatment, like I went overboard, which is probably why things happened a lot faster for me. But when I say commit to binge eating recovery, I mean like commit to the healing work. Does that mean that you need to go to therapy or join a group program? No. Like you can see on my podcast older episodes of people sharing their story and they didn't do treatment and they didn't go to a therapist, they did it themselves. I'm just saying committing doing recovery instead of just committing to the diet. I think a question to ask yourself to see if you're taking it seriously, and again, this might be a hard truth, but let me tell you, I was in your shoes first, and sometimes these hard truths are so important to put that fire under our booty to change. Is I know for me, I used to say I would do anything to stop binge eating. Tell me what I need to do, I will do anything. And then my therapist was like, can we delete MyFitnessPal? And I was like, no. And she was like, can you stop weighing yourself? And I was like, are you kidding? No. And she was like, can you eat a little bit more? And I was like, no. Ironic, right? I will do anything to stop binge eating. Talk about your emotions, talk about your family, let's look at your self-worth, let's look at your body image. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. You say you would do anything to stop binge eating. That doesn't mean that you need to do it right now, right? Like I have so many people that come to me in my group program, Binge Eating Unchained, that are like, I so badly want to get to a place where I'm not tracking calories and weighing myself anymore. I am willing to do the work that it takes to get to that place. I just don't feel ready to let go of that today. And I'm like, that is all that is literally all I need to hear, and that's all you need to say. It's not the seriousness of, okay, you're not being serious if you are not willing to delete MyFitnessPal today. It is, where is your head in the long game? Like, long term, do you even see that on your radar? Is that even your end all be all intention? Because if it's not, I would just get curious about that. And then another thing to reflect on, and this is a hard thing too, is why are you hesitant to take binge eating recovery seriously? If you do feel hesitant to fully commit to this work. For me, I felt hesitant for a long time after I had gotten out of denial, right? Like once I finally realized, oh, I'm struggling with binge eating. Oh, what I'm doing isn't working. Oh, to heal and to stop the binges, that means that I need to take recovery seriously. I did have a moment of hesitation. The hesitation came from, first and foremost, by me admitting that I have a problem, and by me sharing this with someone, and by me asking for help. I had this fear that I couldn't go back, because in a way, I liked binging. I didn't like what it was doing to my life, and I didn't like the weight gain, and I didn't like how miserable it was making me, but in a way, there were elements of it that I did like. I liked the high of it. I liked the foods that I was eating. I liked the excitement of planning it. I know it sounds wild, but anybody who has struggled with binging like totally understands what I'm saying right now. And so I was so afraid that if I told someone and if I committed, I couldn't go back. And so that made me hesitant. And then I also had this really big fear that if I didn't binge anymore, I was never gonna feel full. Because in my brain, the only time that I ever truly felt full was when I binged. Now, I mean, hindsight 2020, it makes a lot of sense because I never allowed myself to eat until fullness. So of course I never felt full until I binged. But I was afraid that if I never had the opportunity to binge, that I was never gonna feel full again. And so between not having the option to go back, which, I mean, you always can, right? Like I tell my clients that all the time. Like if you hate this and if you really wanna go back, but like, no, I'm not holding you hostage here. You can totally go back. Give yourself the opportunity though to really try. Like give yourself the opportunity to really experience this and really get involved in this and really immerse yourself in this, because you don't know until you try, right? You don't know until you try. So just think about if there's any hesitation, like what is the hesitation there? And then ultimately, when you get to a place where you're more afraid to stay the same than you are to do something different, then that's when you know that you're ready to change. And that's when that hesitation will go away. With that being said, that doesn't mean that you're not scared anymore. And that doesn't mean that you're not apprehensive. And it doesn't mean that you're totally willing to do everything right now. But it means that you are willing to do something. And you are willing to try. Because you know that there is a better way to live. Because anything is better than the way that you are currently living, even if it feels so scary because you have no idea what's going to happen on the other side. You know, I think that's what keeps people in the cycle for so long. That's definitely what kept me in the cycle for so long, is the predictability of it. It was so known. I think the thing that gets misunderstood about comfort zones when we talk about comfort zones is that it's comfortable. No, it's called comfort zone because it's a known zone. You know it, which makes it comfortable. You know your cycle. You know how it goes. And there's safety in that. There's a lot of safety in that psychologically, right? Like, would not be in the diagnostic manual of mental disorders if this wasn't psychological. If it was simply about, and this is the thing that I feel like not a lot of people think about, and like all of these quote unquote experts on social media talking about binge eating, and they're like, don't buy this food or restrict this food or da-da-da-da. If it was as simple as that, why would it be in the DSM? Right? Like, why would it be in the DSM? Just something that I've always thought about. Okay, so committing to taking binge eating recovery seriously. After that, we have to get clear on your why. And I know that I sound like a broken record here. I know everybody says this. I know that if you've done any workshops with me before, you've heard this before. I'm gonna say it again. And I'm gonna say it again because if you feel like this is one of those things where you're just gonna fast forward through and roll your eyes and be like, yeah, like I know that I wanna stop binge eating because it's ruining my life. Here's how I want you to think about it. Your why is going to be the driver throughout this whole process. Binge eating recovery is not easy. It is not easy. That's why not everybody does it. And when things get hard and when you want to throw in the towel, that's when your why is going to push you forward. That is the thing that is going to push you forward. That is the difference between someone who hits a wall and goes back to old behaviors and someone who keeps moving forward. Who has the strongest, deepest why? People don't recover to stop binge eating. They recover for the life that they're going to gain. I'm going to say that again. People don't recover to stop binge eating. They recover for the life that they are going to gain. If your why is rooted in, I just want to stop binge eating, that is not going to be strong enough. What do you want? What do you want back in your life? What is the life that you're going to gain? When you're not binge eating anymore, when you're not obsessing over food anymore, when this isn't consuming your life anymore, what are you going to get back? That is going to be the foundation for your why. I always do a consultation call with someone before they join my program, Binge Eating Unchained, because I just want to make sure that their head is in the right space, because they don't need to be wasting time and money when they're not ready. I know what that feels like, and I'm not here to just sell something, you know what I mean? And so when someone is in the headspace of, I want to recover from binge eating because I don't want to gain more weight, or I want to recover from binge eating so I can stop eating all the cookies in the house, or I want to recover from binge eating so I can eat less calories, versus I want to recover from binge eating because I want to get my life back. I want to recover from binge eating because I want to be present with my kids again. I want to recover from binge eating because I want to move from just existing in my life to actually living my life. Notice how different those are. I know finding your why can be difficult, especially if this isn't something that you've done before. So I'm going to insert a clip right here on me walking through with someone how to get to her why. This is really powerful, and I think that you'll get a lot out of this. So I'm going to move over to that clip right now. All right, are you ready?
I think so. I feel like I'm still struggling with it really hitting in the feels, which is why I'm here, because I just feel like I know what my why is, but I don't know. I wonder whether it could be more than that. So I said initially that I had had enough with the constant yo-yo dieting, and just never feeling kind of happy with my body, no matter what size that I am. And that I was fed up with the food rules that I've made for myself and have continued to live by. And I think for me, I don't want to continue to feel the shame and guilt after eating certain foods, or if I've eaten too much. And I'm sick of like the food having that control over me. And it really has affected like my mental health because of that. So then from that, I had put about not wanting to spend kind of the next 10 years how I spent the last. So I turned 30 in March, and I started my difficulties with food when I was 19. So it's literally been like my whole 20s. When I look back at the things that I have done in my 20s, every single memory is tainted by either remembering that I was really struggling with food, or that I had tried purging, or that I wasn't happy in my body. Like every event I can think of, there is something there that has been kind of tainted, and I just don't want to go into my 30s, 40s, 50s continuing to relive the same cycle.
Wow.
And I know I mentioned you before as well, because at some point I'd like to maybe try starting a family, and I know that my body is going to change and I'm going to have no control over that. And I think I am going to really struggle with that. And then also post pregnancy, the pressure that brings, and also my eating habits onto my children, because reading all the stuff that we've read, we all know it comes from somewhere, and I don't want to be responsible for that. I don't want my child to go through what I've been through. but it's still not hitting them feels.
Okay. So I think the problem that you're running into is that all of these are amazing and beautiful thoughts, but it's almost like a web of all of these different things. And we need to kind of just like put them together to see how they piece together. So when you say initially, I've had enough with yo-yo dieting and never feeling happy with my body, why? Like, why have you had enough?
I'm just exhausted. Like I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm just exhausted of it consuming literally every aspect of my life. Like food is literally on my mind. Not so much now since I've started this course, but before that, it was on my mind every minute of the day. What I was going to eat next for my next meal, what I can eat, what I can't eat, what I'm going to eat on the weekend, because I would store up all my calories because I could then have it on the weekend. So, can't have it today, but I'll have it on the weekend. And then, getting to the end of the day and feeling horrible. And then the next morning, the first thing I think about when I wake up is my weight and how I look and how my tummy feels because I've eaten all that food the next day.
Yeah.
And like the impact it's had on my mental health and my mood and the way, like my partner can tell immediately. He's like, you're not okay. And he'll know immediately if he's been out at work and he comes home at night, he'll know just by looking at me that, I've had a binge or whatever.
What was that taking away from? Like, how was that affecting your quality of life?
I'm just scared to be alone. So for me, it's that feeling of loneliness. And then it amplifies that. So when I binge, I then feel even worse. So then I go on to, I don't know if I'm answering this right, but then I go on to like social media and compare myself to, people on social media, or I get into this like, no, this is it. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to, and I guess it takes away me being able to be content with myself.
Okay.
And I think that's what it is. Like, I really struggle to just do nothing. When I do nothing, or I have nothing planned, or I'm on my own, even if I've got my dog, that's when I reach for the food.
What does that do to your relationships, to your work, to your weekends, to your free time?
I can get cranky with my partner. I can take it out on him. If I binge on a weeknight, the next morning for work, I feel miserable. And I think my weekends, again, it can impact what I do on the weekend, whether I'll exercise more, whether I'll feel like I don't need to because I've been good. What I'm going to wear, how I feel in my body, how I experience things. So, for example, if I've had a binge the night before and I'm going out for lunch the next day, I would freak out about that and be like, I can't have breakfast because I've, overate the night before. And then you have to put on a big smiley face and pretend everything's fine.
So when you say then, I don't want to spend the next 10 years as I spent the last, if I said, Hannah, here's a clip from you, or here's a clip of future you, 2033 you, I'm going to play it right now, and I play it, and you're in the exact same space doing the exact same thing. How does that make you feel? What does that bring up?
My first thought is failure, and also misery, that I'm still going to be just miserable. Just it's all I focus on. I don't feel like I live in the present. I'm always chasing that body. When I get there, I'm going to be fine and everything's going to be normal. And so I would just feel that I've made no progress whatsoever.
What would you be saddest about missing out on?
I think just my own happiness. And like I think for me it is the constant feeling every day of what I look like, what I'm going to eat, what I can't eat.
That last piece of this going into your potential future kiddos, why do you care about that? Why does that matter to you to not bring this into them?
When I think that, I think about my own inner child, and the upset that I've been through, because I feel like I probably turned to food because my parents aren't that emotionally available even now. So I think I use that as a comfort. But I just, how like you say you wouldn't treat your friends the way you treat your own body. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine, even better to think about whether my child would go through what I've been through, because I just know how awful it is, and life is so much more than
Yeah.
what we look like.
I think there's two parts to this. A, little Hannah deserves so much more. Little Hannah deserves so much more than this, because this started for little Hannah at 6. So I think that's part A of your why. And I think that that specifically for body stuff, when that comes up, my why is little Hannah deserves more. I
Yeah,
deserve more, but more than that, little Hannah deserves more. The
yeah,
second piece of this, I think, is that you weren't just put on this earth to be as small as possible. Like, that's not Hannah's purpose. And so I think that second part of your deeper why is I am here to do so much more than get my body to be as small as possible.
yeah,
Are people where maybe that kind of life is enough for them? For me, that's not enough. I know for you, that's not enough. Because in 10 years, if you were in the same place, bam, that hits.
yeah.
I'm here for so much more than just shrinking my body.
And that's so true, because I wrote that in my letter, literally to my body. So yeah, yeah,
For you, I think on those days where you're really struggling, little Hannah deserves more. I deserve more. I'm here to do so much more. I mean, like, your theme is just like, I deserve more. Like, there is more to life than this. That's not enough for me.
thank you. That was really
So
helpful.
I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable. I know that wasn't easy. Wasn't that so great? Like, I love that. And I love doing that with clients, and I love doing that with you guys, because I know that it's hard to go from that first layer down to this is something that hits and that feels. But when you have something that hits and that feels, that is going to be the thing that keeps you moving on those hard days. So that was finding your why. The fourth thing that you're going to do is you are going to find a community. And I know that that's the biggest turnoff for people that struggle with binge eating, because there's so much shame. I know when I was struggling with it, it was one of those things that was under lock and key. I was like, there is absolutely no freaking way that I'm ever going to tell anybody outside of an individual therapist about this. And I get that. And I'm not saying that you have to find a huge group. I think even getting to a place where you're telling a therapist about this is massive. And at the same time, I will forever stand by the point that healing happens so much faster in groups, and there is a different layer of healing that happens when you are doing this with community. I did individual therapy twice before I joined a group program, and when I joined the group, it wasn't anything new than what my individual therapist was giving me. The biggest difference is, like, I was definitely at a different headspace. I was so much more ready and willing to do the deeper work. But the second part is that I was with a group. And I remember walking into group the first day. I was the youngest by a lot. It was a small group. There were 4 other women in there. And I sat down. I was so nervous. I had never told anybody outside of, well, I had told my mom I was struggling, but I didn't give her like the nitty gritty. I had never told anyone outside of my therapist about this and my journal. Sitting down, I was like, I'm not talking. I'm not saying this. I'm just gonna like sit here and listen. I remember the first girl spoke, and I was instantly brought to tears, because in that moment, I had this realization that I was not the only person who did this. And I was not the only person who had the thoughts that I had. And I was not the only person who had ever eaten food out of the trash, and not the only person who felt so out of control around food that they needed to spray cleaner on it, and not the only person who would sneak down in the middle of the night and do all of these wild things with food. I wasn't the only person who had eaten their roommate's food and had to drive to CVS in the middle of the night to replace it. Like, I wasn't the only person who did that. And for a long time, I genuinely thought I was. I really thought that I was. And when you hear that from someone, like, I know you're hearing that from me right now, but like, when you're in that space and you're doing it with other people and they're right there alongside you and you hear that, not only does it help with the shame and eliminating the shame that you feel, but it helps you stay motivated because, I mean, we're all competitive people, right? Like, we're all driven people. And I know for me, when I was in a group and we had homework, I wasn't not going to do my homework because they were all doing their homework. So if I didn't do my homework and they did their homework, well, are they recovering faster than me? Like, I literally had those thoughts versus in individual therapy when I didn't do my homework, it was like, okay, we'll just do it next week. And then also when we would have conversations in group, the other people would bring up things, and you guys have probably experienced this in my free life coaching. The other people would bring up things that I was like, I've either been trying to say that, but I didn't have words for it, and you just described exactly what I've been trying to say, or I wasn't even thinking about that, but that is something that I totally do or I totally resonate with, and I'm so happy you brought that up because I definitely need to talk through that. I think the reality is that isolation fuels shame. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean that the only way out of this is through a paid group. If you are not in a financial place where you can do a online group or an outpatient treatment program, it doesn't mean that you're hopeless. There are so many free support groups out there, like so many, whether it's on Facebook, like just Facebook groups. I have a free support group. I'll link it in the description box. So you can find one on Facebook. But also, if you go on the NITA website, nationaleatingdisorders.org, and you go to free and low cost support, they have so many options on there for free support groups. It is how committed are you to recovery? If you are so committed to recovery and you don't have the money, that doesn't have to stop you. There are so many options out there that you can find. Again, if you're committed to recovery, like, you will find these things and you will find these options. They are all out there. You just have to be open to looking. Will I say that it's a little bit harder to do on your own? Totally. Is it impossible? Definitely not. Okay, so that, like, if you think of binge eating recovery and what you're doing this year, so like if you think about binge eating recovery throughout the whole year, I want you to think about it like building a house. Building a house takes a long time. Building a house might not happen in a year. Building a house has a lot of different steps and there are a lot of different layers that go into it. So I want you to think about what we just talked about. So understanding binge eating, committing to binge eating recovery, getting clear on your why, finding a community as like the foundation of the house. Like, that is what is going to ultimately keep the house so freaking strong, because everything else that I'm about to add on to this isn't going to have the same impact if that foundation isn't there. So we build the foundation with those 4 things. And now we can talk about specific things to actually work on for how you are going to stop binge eating. So the very, very first thing and the very first unmet need that we are going to address, because I don't know that I've ever met someone, I know that it's not an all or nothing thing. I know that it does happen, but in my line of work and from my social media and everyone that I've come into contact with, I have yet to meet someone who struggles with binge eating that doesn't also struggle with diet rigidity in some form. Like, I just haven't. Even if they aren't quote unquote classic restricting, there's still judgment and shame that happens with the eating. And so we got to work on that. I feel like that is the absolute first place to start. Like, when we're talking about unmet needs, that is the first one, because that is one that we can tackle right now that eliminates variables when it comes to binge eating, because it is complex and there are a lot of different layers to it. I always say to my clients, like, we want to eliminate as many variables as possible so that we can really get to the main root of what is driving your binge eating in the first place. There can be multiple different things, but if we can eliminate what it might be, then we get closer to finding out what it actually is. So if we start working with your diet rigidity first, that takes out that variable, and then we can look at how is your self-worth and how is your emotion regulation, which is the next 2 that I would have you look at after you have worked on your diet rigidity. So diet rigidity are things like food rules, diet mentality, your black and white thinking around food, food noise, like all of the chaos that you have around food, things that you can't eat, things that you can eat, things that are right, things that are wrong, like making every food decision mean so much. So how do you start with that? Well, the very first place that I recommend you start, and this is how I have all of my clients start, is eating on a consistent basis so that we take out the inconsistency with your eating. So that means eating every 3 to 4 hours and making that a non-negotiable. With that being a non-negotiable, that also means after you binge. One of the things that I see happen so often, and this is something that I was guilty of, is I was like, okay, I'm committed to eating consistently throughout the day, but then if I binged, I would then go a prolonged period of time without eating. And that's just perpetuating the cycle. If regardless of you binge or not, right? Like if you are feeling the urge and you're like, I want to eat this entire box of crackers, and you know, no matter what, in 3 to 4 hours you're eating again, like it does not matter, you can eat this entire box of crackers right now. If you eat this entire box of crackers right now, you're still eating the same in 3 to 4 hours. It's not going to immediately stop the binge, but what it's eventually going to do is it's going to get your body on track with realizing, okay, food is coming in, we're not restricting anymore, and also it will eventually get you to pause. It will eventually get you to pause. And in that pause, you are realizing the food is not going away. The food is not going away, which is going to eliminate that scarcity that is a huge driver of binges that comes from years and years and years and years of dieting. So eating consistently throughout the day, making that a non-negotiable. The second thing is putting all your food on a plate. Doesn't matter if you're binging, it doesn't matter if you're snacking, it doesn't matter if it's one cookie, put it on a plate. When you put it on a plate, what you are doing is you're bringing just a little bit more mindfulness into your eating. You're bringing in just a little bit more awareness into your eating. When you're bringing a little bit more mindfulness and awareness into your eating, you're becoming more present with your food. And as you're more present with your food, it just becomes more enjoyable and you're more connected to your food. And then whenever possible, sit down to eat. Doesn't matter if you're sitting in front of the TV. It doesn't matter if you're sitting with a podcast. We can work on that later, but just sitting down, not running around and eating while you're chasing kids or running around and eating while you're going from one errand to the other, not standing in your kitchen and shoveling food in really fast. I know that that has to happen sometimes, right? Like I'm all here for being realistic. That's why I say whenever you have the chance to, whenever you have the chance to sit down, sit down. Let yourself enjoy your food. What's ironic is I hear so often, nothing else gives me the same pleasure that food does, or when I binge, like nothing else makes me feel that way, or like nothing else tastes as good. Yet for so much of our eating, or so much of my eating when I was going through it, and a lot of my clients do, we're not sitting down and actually enjoying our food. If food is so delicious and we love it that much, why are we not sitting down and allowing ourselves to enjoy our food? Because the pleasure that you're getting out of the binge is not about the pleasure from food. The pleasure that you're getting out of the binge is the numbing, like the pleasure that you're getting from feeling numb. And that is very different. And that is why nothing else hits the same that food does. Why going for a walk and reading a book and coloring doesn't feel the same as food, because those things aren't numbing. They're not numbing. Okay, so that is how you're gonna start working on your diet rigidity. Obviously, there are a lot of different things to do to work on your diet rigidity. I highly recommend reading the book Intuitive Eating to build on that. There's a lot of golden nuggets in there that are really gonna help with that piece. Starting with the diet rigidity is gonna take out that variable, and then from there, you can start working on your self-worth and your mood regulation. And we're gonna go back to the fully committing to recovery and saying, I would do everything to stop binge eating, and asking yourself, would I? Would I eat regularly throughout the day? Would I put my food on a plate? Would I sit down to eat when I can? Would I make sure that I'm eating enough? I would do anything to stop binge eating. Will you? Will you allow yourself to? Oh my gosh, I've been sitting here for so long, my leg is cramping. Okay, then the sixth thing, and this is something that I see so often that so many people don't do, is reflect after their binges. You have to start reflecting, especially if you're not doing this with a therapist or a group. Like, you have to, because if you are reflecting after your binges, and I know that it's not going to be the thing that you want to do, but when you are reflecting after your binges, you are giving yourself an opportunity to see and notice patterns. When you can see and notice patterns, you're going to be able to get back to understanding and getting a clear idea of what your unmet needs are and what is driving those binge urges in the first place. So when I say reflect, I mean, think about your day. Like when you woke up, did you have any thoughts? Did anything happen? Did anything go differently? Was anything going on? So when I say reflect, I mean, think about your entire day. Things that happened, emotions that you felt, thoughts that you had, experiences that you had. Write down as many details as you can remember throughout the day. You don't necessarily need to pinpoint in that moment what the ultimate trigger was, especially if you just have one day of reflection. If you binge frequently though, and if you reflect frequently after, you will be able to flip back and then be like, oh, interesting, this is the exact same thing that happened on both of these days. Or, oh, interesting, I had this thought on this day that I had a binge, and I had this thought on this day that I had a binge. Like, could that have anything to do with what triggered me to binge in the first place? It just helps give you more information. And the more information that you have, the closer that you're gonna get to healing. What I always say to my clients is, when you're approaching this, like, I know it's so hard to not get frustrated with yourself. And I know that you want to change all of this instantly. And I know that it's hard because it takes time. Come at it from a place of, I just want to understand. Like after your binges, I just want to understand why that happened. And not from a place of like, why did that happen? But from a place of like, I really wonder what was going on. Or I really wonder why I felt the need to do that. Or like, what was happening that triggered that? Because I just want to understand. And then the last thing that you're going to do to stop binge eating this year is you're going to look at this journey as one foot in front of the other instead of looking at the entire mountain. When you start looking at the entire mountain, you're gonna get really overwhelmed. Like even when I was saying, and I was hesitant to say this, but I wanted to put it out there so you know what's to come next. Like even when I was saying start with diet rigidity and then go to self-worth and then go to emotions, like right there, like if that felt overwhelming, you're looking at the mountain. I said that so that you have the direction for where to go next. Right now, just one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, right? So like if you are working on eating consistently and putting your food on a plate and sitting down and you're like, okay, like I got this down, I'm feeling good about this, then let's look at what is the next thing that we can do to take care of you? What is the next thing that we can do to make yourself feel loved and supported and taken care of? Like what's the next thing that you feel like is gonna help you, and let's focus on that. That is one of the other reasons why working with a professional is so helpful, is because they're able to guide you in that direction. Again, is it impossible if you have to do it by yourself? Absolutely not. It is really helpful with a professional though, because they are able to guide you to that next step. Something that I really love, and this was from the book Atomic Habits, this wasn't from my brain, but something that I really love that James Clear said in this is, what if it wasn't about the goal but becoming someone? So the way that I interpreted that is, what if this wasn't about stopping binges, but rather becoming the type of person who takes care of their body, becoming the type of person who meets their needs, becoming the type of person who allows themselves to rest, becoming the type of person who validates themselves, right? Like what if it wasn't about stopping the binges, but rather becoming the type of person who, insert whoever you want to come, and the binges stopping as a byproduct of that. The sun, just like that. The sun is shining in and saying, I am enjoying that direction, if you're watching this on YouTube right now. James Clear says, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. So is this choice moving me closer to becoming the type of person who takes care of their body, treats their body with respect, the type of person who eats freely, who has a healthy relationship with food? Or is this a decision that is pushing me closer to distress and obsession? So rather than saying this is the year that I'm gonna stop binge eating, if you switch that to this is the year I'm becoming the type of person who, and binge eating, stopping being a byproduct of that, this is the year I'm becoming the type of person who, what comes to mind? There's no right or wrong. But instantly, what comes to mind? Like, who do you want to become? Put that there. Doesn't that feel so different? That's going to then give you much clearer action, because if you want to become that type of person, then you can ask yourself, well, how does that person show up? And if I was living like that kind of person today, how would I act today? How would I show up? I had written down in my notes here to just piggyback off of that. If I want to become the type of person who, whatever you wrote down, wow, that sun is bright. If I want to become the type of person who, what do I need to do, change, learn, work on? And then going back to, is this choice pushing me closer to becoming that type of person, or is this choice pulling me further away? And that's something that I tell my clients in Binge Eating Unchained at the beginning of the program to reduce overwhelm, because there's all these different steps, right? And I feel like it can get so overwhelming on all the different things to do to stop binge eating. And if we make it so simple, and if we take all of the specific action steps out of it, and we just bring it back to that one question. When you go throughout your day, any choice that you make, is this a choice that is pushing me closer to peace and freedom, or pulling me further away? And it's not about being perfect. It's about getting more choices that are aligning you with getting closer to peace and freedom than the other way, distress and obsession. I know that there are a lot of people that have a lot of doubts about recovering from binge eating and that feel very hopeless. I don't think that it's a matter of can you recover from binge eating. I think that it is, are you willing to do the work to become the type of person who prioritizes healing? I think that that's the difference. It is not a matter of can you recover from binge eating. I believe everyone can. I truly believe everyone can. I do think that not everyone is willing to do the work. I really, truly do. It is, are you willing to do the work to become the type of person who prioritizes healing? We don't know until you try. We don't know until you try. This is the year. This is the year, whether you're watching this at the beginning of January or you are watching this and just came across this in the middle of the year, right? It doesn't have to start at the beginning of the year. This is the year that you are going to change. And this is the year that you are going to heal your relationship with food, because this is the year that you're going to do something different. And that doesn't mean a different way of restricting, a different way of dieting, a different way of controlling. This means that you are going to fully commit to healing your relationship with food. You are going to fully commit to doing the deeper healing work, because you know that there is a better way to live. And because you can 100% recover from this. It is not that you're lazy. It's not that you're weak. It's not that you're addicted to food. It's not that you have zero discipline. It's that you have unmet needs that need to be healed. And you are reacting by binge eating as a way to try and meet those needs, that going for a walk, taking a breath, or journaling isn't going to help you stop. It's just not. Like, there's so many layers to this, and I was like writing out the outline for this literally, and I was so stuck because I didn't know where to take this, because I was like, I could be talking for 6 hours about this. I really, truly could. So if there's anything that you feel like you need more information about, like, please ask and I'll make more episodes. I am also adding a new segment to this podcast called Ask Ryann, where I would love for you guys to submit questions and I'll be able to break them down in a way that I just will never be able to do over DM and email. But also, I think it's really helpful for you guys to hear each other's questions. Just a way for me to continue helping you guys on this journey, because I believe in you. I know you can do this. I really, truly know that you can do this. I think that your biggest block is that you have been focusing on how to stop binge eating rather than why are the binges happening in the first place. And not from a judgmental place of like why, but from a curious place of like, I wonder and I want to know and I want to heal and I want to get back into my life. People don't recover to stop binge eating. They recover for the life that they gain. I'll leave it at that. All right, guys, I love you so much.